Hello, everyone. I welcome you for our today's Trainer Day online. And Angela Espinosa wants to present some introductory notes about variety engineering. Please, Angela.
Okay, so this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna just tell you the story rather than do a formal presentation because you all know the concepts. So I'm gonna just tell you the story of how do I introduce the ideas of variety. And this is normally I normally do this as the first session before starting introducing the VSM because I think that the concept of variety is fundamental to Stafford Beer's theory, and I think that is one of the main distinctions between the VSM and other theories of organizational development or effectiveness. So I like very much to clarify the idea of complexity. I like talking about complex adaptive systems and complex systems in general because the theory of complexity didn't exist when Stafford started talking about the VSM, and it was in the 1990s, really, when lots of people talk about complexity and complex adaptive systems. And I found the metaphor very beautiful and very powerful when we want to explain organizations and businesses as complex systems. So I normally try to do some evocation, some images about complexity, complex adaptive systems, and the ideas of neural network, and in particular the idea of self-organization. So I normally explain that in the past, organizations, businesses used to operate in very stable environments in which they could just repeat adapt slightly their business plan year after year. And if the environment didn't change, they could just permanent continue being adaptive to the responsive to the environment. But in the last, with the information technology and the changes in the global environment, the need for continuous adaptation increased enormously. And now these ideas of complexity and adaptation are fundamental. So I do that. I do explain very broadly what is the VSM as a model of effective organization. And I present it as a meta language to talk about to manage organizational complexity. Yeah. And a proven approach to develop a systemic intervention on organizations normally to foster organizational development. Um, I provide my textbook that is this book on sustainable self-governance in business and society that is basically I wrote as a way to guide my students to understand the theory and to go through a number of applications. Um, so I just mentioned that, I mentioned the book, and then I dip into the idea of variety. I take Ross Ashby, and his main contributions, the ideas of homeostats, the principles of self-organization, the good regulator theorem, and the law of requisite variety. And I focus then in the idea of variety. Yeah, I mentioned what is the definition of Ashby of a system, and I think that is important because many people has criticized Stafford Beer because they say that they don't take it, didn't take into account the observer, and this is a big debate in academia. So I basically clarified that from the beginning, both Ashby and Beer talk about a system as an abstraction made by an observer of a particular situation where the observer focuses on what aspects of the situation, especially if it's very complex, they would like to focus to study. Yeah. And then from that, the definition of what is the state of a system is a set of numerical variables with the observer, which is observer chosen, have in a particular time. And complexity, the formal definition is all the possible states that a system can exhibit. So even if it's a technical definition, yeah, then I move then to explain what does it mean in a business context. I go briefly to the idea of regulation that is fundamental, how we have a system, a total set of states, a subset of good states, and a set of disturbances, and how a regulator is basically trying to take a system to a subset of good states or desired states of organization. Um, I am beginning to talk a little bit about the perception and anticipation, because it's also a way that is lots of people are talking about now, quantum management and new ways of understanding cognition. So I do explain how in the mind of the observer there is a future predictions and a current prediction and a process of perception through sensory inputs in which what we perceive is referred to our internal models. And this is directly related with the way that we understand variety. I do talk, I use several metaphors about the way that we observe a system and the way that we create mental models about this system and the relationship that it has with our beliefs, multiple realities, and the importance of understanding that this doesn't depend on objective knowledge, but basically on the way that we subjectively understand with the world. I do have a brief introduction to mental models, how mental models developed, the relationship between reality and our mental models, and the way that we predict things in reality according to our mental models, and how this is basically related with the way we learn. And then I introduced the idea of complexity, that is the potentiality of a system to exhibit different states. I explained the characteristics of complex systems that are basically open systems that have probabilistic behaviors, are self-organized, their components have their own purposes, co-evolve with a changing environment, follow simple rules, keep a cohesive behavior conducted to systems viability. And then I focus on Stafford, on the BSM. So my introduction to variety is basically saying, okay, Stafford Beer came with this idea of what is a viable system. He represented it as an organization or an operation with a management and interacting with an environment. And he used Rosas's law of requisite variety that says that only variety can destroy variety. I do an introduction to the idea of amplifiers and attenuators, and how variety of the environment is always much bigger than the variety of the operation, and the variety of the operation far bigger than the variety of the management. And then I do some exercises with the students in terms of understanding these ideas of variety with practical examples from the businesses. I start interacting with them and asking them to think, okay, if that's your organization, this is a situation you have experienced, what can you imagine that will be, when will you imagine that will be a need for amplified variety, attenuating variety, and so on, between the operations and the environment, between the management and the operations. This is a cartoon that John, my husband and partner, have done that I really like. That is the explaining a situation that has not requisite variety, like this person trying to attend hundreds of people without having just one machine, and then you is to explain that you can. The requisite variety can be created either for increasing the variety of the regulating system or decreasing the variety to be regulated. No, either you modified the environment and create a different way of queuing to be attended, or you modified the way that the process so that you increase the variety of the person that is providing this service. I do provide examples, business examples about amplifiers and attenuators. And then I normally ask people, I do poses, and then I ask people to reflect about, for instance, the relationship between them and their management, and to what extent they consider that their the management has requisite variety, in which situations it doesn't, to what extent they consider that their organization has or not requisite variety in the interaction with the environment. So I ask the students to do exercise to start internalizing these ideas of variety. I put a lot of emphasis, as you have seen, in the idea of learning, because for me, managing complexity has a lot to do with organizational learning. So the more you learn, the more you have developed variety. The bigger is your variety, the more ignorant you are about a particular task, a particular issue, the lower your variety. And part of the process of developing requisite variety is the process of learning. And this learning, in my view, is very much done in teams. In organizations, what we are doing when we are implementing a particular task is learning about that task, and that learning is an ongoing process. It goes forever. The more we do it, the more we learn. And if we have an organization that facilitates the learning process in the task, then the possibilities of learning and increasing the management of variety of the task and in the relationship with the environment is bigger. So I do talk about organizational learning. And then I ended up talking about viability and introducing the idea of viability. Viability as the ability of a system to maintain a separate identity despite of a changing and sometimes hostile environment, Stafford's definition, yeah, and the focus that the purpose of an organization is what it does, no, and then how do we maintain the viability of an organizational system in its interaction with the environment, but making sure that what it does, that it is capable of implementing the purpose, that normally is producing some products or services for the environment, and then how do we manage in a very dynamic and adaptive way to continue being able to satisfy, to maintain a balanced relationship with the environment by providing what the environment requests from us. So this is, let's say, the last bit of introduction, in which I started introducing. I do some exercises about self-organization. Normally, I get some videos in YouTube saying that are examples of funny examples of how self-organization works or doesn't work in a particular situation. This is a YouTube about managing in an Eastern country, could well be a Latin American country. For those of us Latin Americans here, is exactly the same craziness when you see that everybody sort of managed to self-organize to go through without having too many accidents. And then the question below is, what are these rules of the game that are there? How people know these rules of the game to be able not to be crashing to each other, no? And how can we make them explicit to understand the process of self-organization in a social system? I mentioned also the idea of redundancy of potential command and the relationship between between self-organization, redundancy and potential command, and managing complexity. And I end up with the introduction, with the description of what is a viable system. After that, I just introduce the model, like the three elements: the operation, the environment, the meta system, explain each one of these elements, and I finalize my introduction to the VSM here. I talk just with some generic characteristics of the VSM, that is not a hierarchical model, is a heterarchical model in which a viable organization is more seen as a cluster of autonomous self-organizing parts which work together for a shared purpose by sharing resources and knowledge, and be managed to generate an efficient or effective organization. I put an emphasis on organizational balance, and basically what I say is that a good organizational design is when the organizational components are capable of dealing with complexity and they are properly balanced between them. And at that point, well, this is another cartoon from John that I have borrowed from John Walker that I like very much, in which he shows what is an unbalanced organization versus what is a balanced organization, and basically an organization that has a big body and a very small head, no? Or an organization that have a big head, a huge meta system, and a very small body. And explain that the idea of the VSM is to try to come up with an organization in which the body and the head are balanced, meaning that the meta system and the operations are in balance. There is not an excess in any one. And I end up this session doing good work, with some group work. I ask the students to divide in 3 groups. And one of the exercises that I do is there is a very simple exercise, is to say, in the current context, here in Europe, for instance, Brexit, in the UK, Brexit, COVID-19, climate change, the Russian versus Ukrainian war, the Gaza war, yeah. What are the complexity management challenges that have emerged from your chosen organization? What has changed in the environment? And provide examples of what has changed in the relationship with your customers and suppliers. Provide examples of extra variety you had to deal with as an organization. Provide examples of attenuators and amplifiers you use to deal with environmental complexity. Do you see any examples of self-organization which happen in this situation? What has your complex organization done to handle this complexity? Have you managed to adapt in time? So this is the last exercise that I do. Normally it is, I'm very, very pleased because every time that I have used this exercise and that I have done this introduction to variety and complexity, I've had really, really interesting conversations with the students, and I have the students very deeply engaged into the language, the language of complexity and variety, and beginning to realize that even if it sounds very academic and abstract, they can handle the idea intuitively, and they start having really nice conversations about it through the exercise. Yeah. So this is my introduction. Very happy now to talk to you and see your reactions. What do you think? How useful do you think is it? How does it compare with your own experiences? If you have experiences of teaching the VSM, how useful do you think it is? Whatever.